Okay, so we're trying to solve this equation. Let me put the wall of separation down the middle for us here. And we're solving parentheses squared and no x to the first power. Now you might say, yeah, we have an x to the first power right there. Well, no, he's really under the influence of a 2. See, there's a 2 on it on the whole thing there. So he's really an x squared. So we don't really have an x to the first power anywhere. If this had an x to the first power, or if this did, then that would be a different kind of problem. We'll do those later. But for this one, we don't really have an x to the first power. The only x we have is under the influence of a 2 power. So it's really x squared. So how do you solve parentheses squared when you don't have x to the first power anywhere? Well, step number 1 is you've got to get the parentheses squared alone. So we'll need to do that. So let's start by adding the 4 to both sides. Boom, boom. And then bring this down. And this is what, 98 over there? Okay, now the parentheses squared is not quite alone. One more step. Divide by the 2, right? Because that 2 is right next to the parentheses, so it's multiplied. We get rid of it by dividing. And that gives us 6x minus 6 squared. And this is what, 49? We get to there. All right, so we good to there. So that was all step number 1. Get the parentheses squared. They're alone now, huh? There's nothing I got. So really, I got rid of that minus 4. I got rid of that 2 because I was trying to get the parentheses squared alone. I did. It's completely and totally alone. Okay. Now, step number 2 is we're going to put the root and plus or minus root over the sides. So let's do that. I'll do that. Maybe I'll do that in the next step here to show you. So I'm going to come in here and go, okay. Root, and plus or minus. Got to put plus or minus. Remember my dorky saying, when you put a roof on the house, when you put a root, like a roof, sorry, it's dorky, you got to go up and down the ladder. Plus or minus, that's my up, and my down. Plus is up, minus is down. When you put a roof on if you're going to put a new roof on your house, you'd have to go up and down your ladder, right? You can't just jump on the roof, probably. You need a ladder. So when you put a root over both sides of the equation, you got to put plus or minus. Okay, now what happens from there? Well, you know, I think this rooting cancels squaring. They're the opposites of each other. They neutralize each other like an acid and a base or a poison and the antidote. It neutralizes it, right? A root and a 2 power cancel each other. They're the opposites of each other. The poison and the antidote both disappear. Okay, now the other side, what happens? Well, it's plus or minus. What's the square root of 49? 7, isn't it? It's just a nice clean 7. So now we're not done, are we? We have more work to do because x is still not alone, but we have this plus or minus thing. When you have more work to do and you have plus or minus, which really means 2 things, you have to write 2 equations. That's what's next. Step 3. Write 2 equations. So I'm going to come over here and go 6x minus 6 equals plus 7, and then 6, or 6x minus 6 is minus 7. We have 2 separate equations, right? Because we have a plus or minus. You get the plus 7, you get the minus 7. It's because we have the plus minus options, which means 2 equations. So, you know, if we were done here, if x was already alone, we would just say, those are my 2 answers, plus 7, minus 7, I'm done. Those are my 2 answers. But we're not done. We have more work to do. So we have to do the rest of that work, we have to break it into 2 separate equations. And now we're going to finish each of those two. So dividing wall here, dividing wall there, here a wall, there a wall, everywhere a wall. All right, so now we're going to get x alone. So add 6 to both sides. And boom, boom. We get, this comes down, 6x equals 13. Boom, there it is, 13 over 6. Okay, and then the other one, add 6 to both sides. Boom, boom, we get, bring this down, 6x equals -1. And divide by 6, got to finish getting x alone. So x is alone, it's -1/6. If I didn't finish one over here, x is alone, it's 13/6. So those are our two answers. 13, so we solved both equations, right? I did whatever it took to get x alone. I got rid of the number as subtracted. Last step is always divide. So 13/6 and -1/6. Those are my two answers. So I come up here and write those with a comma. So it's going to be 13/6, comma, -1/6, that comma here. And it doesn't matter what, you can put the -1/6 first and then the 13/6, it doesn't matter. You just got to put both answers with a comma in between. There are our two answers. So recapping, what do we do when we have parentheses squared? We get the parentheses squared alone. And then we put the root and the plus or minus root over the sides. It's an antidote that cancels the square. And then you got to write two equations and then you solve them both. And so there we go.